So I'm actually going to start my speech with a personal story, and it's not a very pleasant story, but it's my personal experience of how I figured out what my topic was, how I found out about it. So I have known this young couple for a few years now. They were regulars at the coffee shop I worked in high school. So they would come in, we would get to know each other and all this stuff. And when I moved to Bloomington, I obviously didn't see him as much. And I went home about 6 months ago, and I ran into the husband of the couple, and I started talking to him. And I found out that him and his wife couldn't have kids. They had been trying really hard for a few years, and they just couldn't. So because of that, they both turned to hard drugs. While doing hard drugs, they found out the wife had actually gotten HIV from it, from using dirty needles. And if that's not sad enough, about 2 months after they found that out, they found out she was expecting. So then the baby was born with the HIV. And this could have been avoided if they, first of all, wouldn't have done the drugs. But second of all, if they would have known about a syringe service program. And for those of you that don't know, syringe service programs, according to the CAC.gov, it can also be referred to as syringe exchange programs, needle exchange programs, and needle syringe programs that provide access to sterile needles and syringes free of cost and facilitate safe disposal of used needles and syringes. So basically it's a place where users or anybody that's in need of needles or syringes can go and expose of their old dirty needles, and they'll dispose of them safely so nobody gets harmed by that, and then get new clean ones. So they are doing their hard drugs as safely as possible, I guess. Why are SSPs needed? There are 11.8 million people who inject drugs worldwide. 11.8 million is a huge number, and half of this number, those people reside in 3 different countries, which are China, Russia, and the US. So in the US alone, there are millions of people injecting drugs. Because drugs are illegal, people tend to do it in a risky way, which includes sharing needles and reusing needles, which is the cause of HIV. That's how people get it, because you pass it on from one person to another through needles. A study in 2015 showed that 6% of HIV cases and 10% of AIDS cases were caused by injected drug use. And if this continues, 1 in 23 of all women users and 1 out of 36 of all male users will obtain HIV from dirty needles. Before I started this, I handed you guys cards. It either says the word green or red on it. Did anybody get the card that says red? You got the card that said red. Okay, so I actually marked 23 of these. So if we were all women that were using, you would be the one that got the HIV. Yeah, it's that common. It's crazy that there's only a few cards left, so if we had a few more people, one person out of all those people would get HIV if we were users. It's way more common than I ever thought it was. The results of the syringe service program. The Secretary of Society of Addiction Med states that a scientific review has now proven that needle exchange programs can reduce the transmission of HIV. The scientific study that she's talking about was, they studied the case that since 1989, when the first one opened, there has been a 30% reduction of HIV cases in the United States, and there has been an 80% reduction of risk behaviors associated with being an injected user, which means 80% less of the users are reusing needles or sharing needles because they feel they can go to this place and get safe needles. I am not a supporter of hard drugs, that's not what I'm trying to promote, but I do know people that have been affected by it and have gotten HIV from it. So I do know that addiction is a disease and users are going to use, so we might as well try to help them use as safely as possible. And there's not really much that we can do to support this. There are many restrictions in federal funding for the syringe service programs. The lack of dedicated fundings for SSP means that any federal dollar reallocated to support syringe services programs must be cut from other important prevention programs. That means that there's not a direct funding for syringe service programs, and any of the money they get comes from other prevention programs, which stinks because those prevention programs are just as important as the syringe service program. So there's not really much you can do to support it besides word of mouth and just voting, advocating and voting. Just be kind to those people that you know are users. If you suspect somebody is, maybe let them know about it. because it could honestly save their lives if you did. And